Hello, Hey Boomer community. My name is Wendy Green, and I am your host for Hey Boomer. And I finally have a little bit of a voice back. um, so, Hey Boomer is a show for people who will soon transition who, or who have already made the move to retirement. And we're asking, what's next? Where's my purpose? What am I doing here? How can I feel fulfilled? And our goal with every episode of Hey Boomer is for you to leave inspired, that you have learned something, that you've been motivated by some of what you've heard, that you feel like you're part of the Hey Boomer community. So, just full disclosure, I have been an intermittent user of financial planners. Uh, Raising my children as a single mom, I had a 401k that I contributed to through work. And when I managed to save anything else, my father generally was the one who gave me advice about how to handle my investments. But, we're at the point in our life now where it's not about start early, save, pay yourself first, all of that information that we get when we're young. It's about, okay, you have what you have, and now you have to figure out how to live on that for the rest of your life or however long that's going to be. And of course, we are in the age of longevity, so that could be quite a long time. So it's become very obvious to me that we need to start talking to some experts about not just how to manage what we have, but how to consciously and intelligently use the money so that we can withdraw what we need, so that we can reinvest what we don't need when we have to take required distributions. What's the best way to handle it as far as our taxes are concerned, thinking about inheritance, all of those kinds of things. So lucky for me that I have this show, and lucky for you that I have Quintin Pile as my guest today. And we're going to talk about all of that. So let me tell you a little bit about Quintin. He's a native of Tyler, Texas. He currently resides in Greenville with his wife, Molly, and their new son, Drew. And Quintin originally came to South Carolina on a scholarship for the NCAA Division I Wofford Terrier baseball team as a pitcher. Cool. He has an undergraduate degree from Wofford College in Finance and Accounting and an MBA from St. Mary's University. Quintin is a certified financial planner at Greenwood Capital. And watching his father operate a small business that employed anywhere from 25 to 50 people, he developed a passion for all things entrepreneurship and finance. Quintin started his first business at 12 years old, knocking on doors to solicit his yard work services. And he continues to have that entrepreneurial spirit going forward. Outside of the office, Quintin volunteers as the varsity pitching coach at J.L. Mann High School, and he assists with the Miracle League, which is a nonprofit baseball league for those with autism. If he is not on a baseball diamond, you may find him hunting, offshore fishing, and spending time with his family. But before I bring Quintin on, I know, I'm sorry, Quintin, you got to wait another couple minutes. I have a couple of never too old stories to share with y'all. The first one is about Marjorie Callahan. Marjorie is a 72-year-old retiree in Sarasota, Florida, and she trains year-round in a unique discipline, senior synchronized ice skating. She competes locally and nationally with her team, Tropical Spice on Ice, and the sport blends elements of singles and pairs skating with ice dancing in side-by-side performances by teams of 8 to 20 skaters. Miss Callahan didn't grow up skating. It wasn't until age 60 that she signed up for lessons. In 2016, after 6 years of practice and lessons, she was invited to join the team. The average age of the 12-member team is about 65. The oldest competitor is 82. The women typically enter 3 competitions a year and put on 2 local shows. And during competitions, teams are required to demonstrate formations like linking arms to form a circle or a block. And she says, Miss Callahan says, there's no greater sense of accomplishment than performing and knowing my grandkids are watching. So keep skating, Marjorie. For my second story, I want to talk about cowboy boots. I love my cowboy boots. In fact, if I could wear cowboy boots year round, I probably would. But I have one pair of boots that's probably 30 plus years old that I've had resold a few times. It's crazy. So anyway, I thought I'd look into the history of cowboy boots. And the Fry Shoe Company is one of the leaders in American cowboy boots. The company was founded in 1863. It is the longest operating shoe company in the United States. But they did not always make cowboy boots. During World War II, they made work boots for the military. They later became very fashionable, worn by the likes of Jackie O, John Lennon, and Bruce Springsteen. I was hoping to learn that they were still a family-owned company, but they have been bought a few times, and they still produce some of the iconic boots that made them famous, and I will hopefully never be too old to wear my cowboy boots. So with that, hi everybody that has said hi. With that, I want to bring Quintin on.
Hey,
Hello,
Wendy.
Hi, Quintin. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you taking the time to have me on.
Baseball pitcher. How cool.
I'm back in the day. Back in the day. Not so much anymore.
Gotta save that arm. So, Quintin,
Yeah.
remember when I met you, I was feeling a little skeptical. I was like, oh, you're kind of young to know what we're going through in this 65 and up age group. How can you relate and how can you talk to us? And you told me a story about your dad and his business and selling his business. So I'm sorry I had that age discrimination thing going on, but would you share that story with the audience just so everybody is like feeling good about all this?
Sure. Yeah. You did not hide your emotions well as soon as you jumped on that first Zoom with me. I was like, I can crack into this. It's okay. So, but yeah, would love to share. It's a great story, just for myself, and then for my father, who's a mentor of mine and a brilliant businessman. So he was a self-made individual, built a business that employed anywhere from I think 25 to about 50 people, depending on how many franchises were operating at the time. And so I grew up around the store, and I did everything growing up from mowing the grass out front and trimming and pulling weeds to, pulling parts for mechanics, cleaning the shop floor, washing cars, being a shuttle boy for customers. I just really, it ran the gamut when it came to work growing up in the business and working in it. And so I had a passion for small business, and it's something that I worked for a small company here, and I started with a big company and gravitated towards a small company. So I think that's been instilled in me. And so my father, sometime when I was in college, I really hadn't quite made up my mind of what career path I was going to lead towards. I always thought I'd probably go back into the family business. I was really the plan A at the time. And I was home for Thanksgiving, and we're sitting there having a little snack, and he asked, "Hey guys, Quintin, do you enjoy what you're studying?" And at the time, I was in some financial statement analysis class. So I was learning about stocks and bonds and all that. And I said, "Yeah, I love it. It's fascinating. It's challenging. Um, the depths to it, it's just endless, and it's really a competitive sport, if you will, in a way." And my father said, "Okay, good. You're gonna have to get a job." And I said, yes, Dad. I know we'll have to work after I'm out of college." And he's like, "No, you're gonna have to get a job that's not with us." I sold the store, and I said, "Oh my gosh," you know, it was out of left field. Hadn't really talked about it, and stoked for him. He, definitely paid his dues for sure. And it was a great opportunity for him to retire. And so fast forward a year or two, as a business owner, when you're going through the exit, if you haven't done a whole lot of exit planning, you kind of end up with this lump sum and you're kind of playing offense, or really quickly and trying to find an advisor. How do I manage my money in retirement? How do I withdraw money? And so he hired an advisor from a big wirehouse. And at the time, I was studying the same material in school. And so I started digging through the portfolio, the decisions that were made, the plan that was built per se. And I just thought, my gosh, there's such a better way to do this. And a little light bulb went off in my head and said, okay, well, if this person is doing this quality of a job, servicing, these kind of clients, there's a huge need for real competent and, sound, prudent advice that's in clients' best interest. As a business owner, you've poured your whole life's work back into the business constantly. Then that light switch happens at retirement, and you're essentially just letting control go and trusting, your life's work into someone else's hands, and you expect them to do, what's ultimately in your best, interest. The fiduciary standard, as we call it in the industry. And that just wasn't being done for him, and it was tough to see. And I had a great mentor at the time, and we really dug it apart and found loopholes that that are not loopholes per se, but just holes in the plan and things that could have been done better. And so I was in grad school at the time. Fast forward another year, and at that moment, I just said, never going to look back. I purchased the CFP materials out of my own pocket. Ended up winning a scholarship for that later on, which was a huge blessing. And I just really never looked back. And so that's really how I got started in the industry, and was motivated to, make a career and a profession out of this.
Yeah, and I think you really got some insight into what it takes once you're retired to start managing your money. It's different than when you're just early on investing.
Yeah.
So let's start there at the beginning. Let's just say, it's now we've reached 65 or 70 years old. We walked out the door of our employer for the last time,
Mhm.
and we want to know, do we have enough money to live on? How do we start figuring that out?
Sure. So sometimes people, and I'm sure we have some listeners out there that they'll even come a little bit earlier than that, say 62. There's a misconception that, at 62, you can, since you qualify for Social Security, you also qualify for Medicare. And that's unfortunately not true. And so healthcare is a big expense that often people don't account for. But that's another topic in terms of planning. So essentially, there's 5 things that you can control when it comes to financial planning at its core. How long do you want to work? And obviously, we've kind of eliminated that if we're already at this point. How much do we want to save along the way, which also has somewhat been eliminated at this point, unless we need to work a little bit longer or part-time job. How much risk do we want to take in retirement? The last thing we want for clients is to be up at night, tossing and turning, not comfortable with their plan or their allocation. Number 4 is, how much do I want to spend in retirement? So that's often a big needle that can, on the pendulum, that can swing based on how investments are performing. What sort of lifestyle expenses do you plan on incurring during retirement? Are there big lump sum expenses that you envision happening in the near future, such as a car purchase or home renovations or some sort of donation to charity, things of that nature? And then 5, the last thing that you can control is your legacy, right? How much do you want to leave anything behind? How much do you want to leave behind? Who do you want to leave it behind to? What sort of structure? So those are really the 5 key points that you can control, with 2 of those really being eliminated if you really are searching for someone at this point in your life. So essentially, it's about goal setting and figuring out what's important to you, and really starting there. We sort of reverse engineer into the financial planning process from there.
Okay, so we sit down, say
Yep.
you were my financial planner, which I have been interviewing financial planners to figure out who I want to work with. But so we sit down and we kind of go through all of those things. And at some point we have to reach a number that says, I need this much money to live on. I need this kind of cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I have these buckets, right? I have Social Security, I have savings, I have my IRA, I have whatever.
Yeah.
How do we start to figure out what bucket do we take from?
Sure. So Social Security planning is huge, right? There's if you take it early, you get penalized for taking it at 62 or between, depending on where you were born, your full retirement age could be 66 in some months. It could be 66 on the dot or 67. It really just depends on what you were born. But if you take it each year, you take it early, you get a little bit penalized. I believe it's to the tune of 8%. And then if you delay Social Security, you get a bonus, right? So you can delay it up to 70 years old, and you get a percentage bonus each year you delay it. And that can have a dramatic effect on, a financial plan and the probability of success of a plan. Taking it early, is that the bridge that will sort of bridge the gap for you to retire early if you need to take it early, that sort of cash flow? Is that more important than having a bigger payout later in life? And so there's two things to plan for when it comes to Social Security. Family longevity. You don't obviously want to delay your Social Security if, unfortunately, everybody in your family has a history of dying relatively early. And then number two, the other factor is how important is that monthly cash flow when it comes to your plan. So it can really swing the pendulum if you take it earlier, if you delay it, or if you take it on time. So I think that's the very first thing when it comes to financial planning, the cash flow needs, because then you do have that predictable source of income coming in once you do turn on that light.
Okay. And then you have the required minimum distributions. Those start at 72, right?
They do. It used to be 70.5, and now you got a little bit of a break at 72. You'd have to start taking money out.
Okay. And so, so say I'm taking my Social Security, say I'm taking my required minimum distributions. What if I don't need as much as is required? Can I reinvest that?
You can. So the reason the government is RMD only applies to a qualified account. Qualified account being any sort of 401k that you have outstanding, an IRA as well, anything that's on a tax deferred basis. So while you were contributing, you were able to take a tax deduction. And this is essentially Uncle Sam saying, hey, great, you got that tax deduction all those years ago, but it's time to pay up. I need to start collecting some tax revenue. And so, if you're in a position where you don't need those monthly RMDs to the full extent, that's wonderful. It means you're probably in a great financial position. Unfortunately, you do have to take that money out and pay taxes on it. Once you do that, it is yours to spend. You could throw it right back into a brokerage account. Or you could do what's called a qualified charitable distribution. If you're charitably inclined, you can you can contribute money, do a donation directly from your IRA to a foundation, a nonprofit, and receive a tax deduction from there. And you don't pay any sort of income tax on that.
Okay. So I have a question here. It says if your total I guess your Social Security total at 70 is less than half of your spouse's, does it make any sense to wait until 70 to take your Social Security?
It depends. Are they the same age?
No.
Not the same age. Okay. So it will depend on, there's a planning opportunity. So say the spouse that was not the breadwinner is older. There's a good strategy to take hers or his at full retirement age, delay the other spouses, the breadwinners, till 70. So you're getting some sort of income stream at their full retirement age. And at 70, once the breadwinners is activated and delayed and it's accumulated a little bit more, then they can jump on half of the added amount of the breadwinners' Social Security benefit.
Okay. I don't know if that answers it, but
Mhm.
anyway, so
Yeah.
let's talk about housing. Okay,
Mhm.
so I've always heard that ideally you would
Yeah.
pay your mortgage off by the time you're retired. Um, if that was the case for me, I would have to work till I was 98. So probably not going to do that. So, what are some of the financial implications of continuing to own your home with a mortgage
Mhm.
versus renting versus maybe looking at some other long-term care?
Yeah. So I would say going into retirement with the goal, like you said, ideally of owning a home provides a lot of freedom for retirees being debt free. The spreadsheets with where interest rates are currently, if you run any sort of financial analysis on does it make sense to pay off the home or reinvest the extra proceeds, um, if you have hopefully a financial planner or a firm that's doing a great job for you in outpacing, the interest rate of call it 3% or 3.5% on your investments, then it makes sense to not pay off the home early and keep those assets growing in an investment account. There's two reasons. One being whether you have 50% equity in the home or 20% equity in the home, any appreciation in the house, you have full right to. So it's a term called leverage. You're basically using debt to leverage a bigger asset than you currently have money into. So you are getting appreciation on, call it a $500,000 house or a $300,000 house. If it appreciates at 10%, that's a substantial amount of money every single year that you've earned through the appreciation. But it doesn't matter if you own the home outright or if you had $100,000 of equity in the house, you still earn that appreciation. But being debt free does is it does allow you to have a ton of flexibility, through rough market conditions. At the end of the day, you don't owe anybody anything for the roof over your head. It also does provide you with flexibility in terms of, okay, well, do I want to liquidate this house and take advantage of current market conditions and possibly downsize or possibly start renting, things of that nature. So it's really that there's pluses and minuses to both, and there's no um, one one answer fits all pieces or
Sure.
fits all puzzles. I would say a good rule of thumb is it really depends on what your interest rate is. If you want to be aggressive and be debt free, if your interest rate's at 5.5% or 6%, do you really expect to outpace? So say the equity market returns you 10%. That's an arbitrage or a difference of call it net of 4%. Is that 4% difference really worth the stress of market volatility, having debt over your head? For me and how I advise my clients, it's not. I would
Mm-hmm.
take that money and put it, towards debt pay down. Now, if, I own a home, I have a 15-year mortgage at 2.35%. And so there's not a dime of extra principal payment going into that mortgage. I'm
Yeah.
adjusting the difference. So it really just depends on, again, back to your goals. Do you want to, does owning a home even make sense for retirement? Are you wanting to travel a ton? Okay, well, if you're traveling a lot and you don't want to have to do with home maintenance and all of those things, and then no, maybe renting's the best option for you. It just
Mm-hmm.
really depends.
Yeah. So it sounds like a discussion of goals and,
Yeah.
what your realities are to make that decision. So somebody is asking if we delay taking Social Security,
Mhm.
which investment bucket? So after tax investments, like your
Yeah.
stocks, a Roth IRA or an IRA is best to draw living expenses from?
It depends what your tax bracket is.
Hmm.
So one of the best um, tools that savers and investors have are different types of investment vehicles. Tax free, whether that's a Roth account, Roth 401k, Roth IRA, a tax deferred vehicle, such as just a traditional 401k, traditional IRA, 403b, plans of that nature, or your standard brokerage account or individual or joint account, however it's titled, which has its own tax advantages built into it, but it's after tax dollars. So you really have to evaluate, okay, am I still earning a lot of income? Am I in a really high tax bracket? But then in 3 years, I'll be fully retired and my, taxes I project will go down. Well, then it makes sense to spend the tax-free money now versus say in 3 years, I'm fully retired. The only sort of income I have is a small pension and my RMDs. My effective tax bracket will be lower. Well, then, it's time to spend the tax deferred money.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
question.
That makes sense. I want to talk about long-term care insurance.
Yeah.
Because I know when we're talking financial plan, and I'm only learning this because of all of the interviewing I'm doing,
Good.
but it's the whole picture, right? It's not just my investments. So fortunately, I have some long-term care insurance that I got when I was 50, but a lot of people in the 65 and up age group that don't have it are finding that it's also very expensive if they can even get it now.
Yeah.
So what are some contingency plans that people might want to consider if they have not been able to get their long-term care insurance?
Sure. So kudos to you for securing it when you did. And that's a big piece of the puzzle, as you mentioned. There's two schools of thought of, okay, to determine if I even need long-term care insurance. And I'll kind of break down the two types if you'd like for me to, and I'll kind of circle back to your question. I don't sell any insurance. I refer that out, but I do advise on it. It's a core competency to a holistic financial plan. So there's traditional long-term care insurance, and basically you purchase it and think of it like term life insurance. If you use it, great, and if you don't use it, all those premiums are gone. There's another policy called a hybrid policy that essentially works as a whole life insurance policy where you pay a big premium and say it has a death benefit of $200,000 or $300,000. And if you die and you hadn't used it, it goes to your heirs or whoever you designate it to. But if you do go to a facility, you do need some sort of skilled nursing or long-term care, it uses that death benefit and it draws it down as you use it. So that's my favorite kind to use because I would rather, if I've put a lot of money into something, I'd rather at the very least know that if I don't use it, at least I still have something that it's not going to grow like your investment accounts will, but at least it will grow a little bit and it will be there at the end. So those are the two types of policies that you can even purchase. There's something else to consider is self-insuring. So we have clients that fit in the bucket of, okay, if I get sick or if my spouse gets sick and we're 2 years or 3 years in a skilled nursing facility, and that's, call it $100,000 a year in a facility, that would devastate our financial plan. We do not have the assets to absorb that. Well, then they're a prime candidate for taking a real hard look at, okay, is the cost of insurance worth it, even at high prices? Because they just simply can't afford to take that risk. We have clients who have substantial assets and they can absorb a financial blow like that just fine. And if they're in good health and their family has good longevity or track record of health through retirement, then I think the pros and cons, it weighs to favor self-insuring if that risk is not detrimental to a financial plan. So that was a lot, but I'll circle back and answer your question, Wendy, about, okay, what if I do need it and I still can't afford it? Typically, if you get checked into a facility or if you realize it's going to be a very long stay, your house is the best source of funds there available if you don't have the investment assets to absorb that blow. One, because you're probably not living in that house anymore. You're probably full-time in skilled nursing or what have you. And so obviously there's home equity lines of credit. you could potentially sell the home and then become a renter after that. And after that's exhausted, there's some facilities who will sign contracts that basically it's like a personal guarantee. If I'm in a facility, say I get diagnosed with dementia and I become incapacitated, then I will exhaust all my assets at this level. So say it's $5,000 a month or $6,000 a month. After all of my personal assets are exhausted, then the facility will cover anything that's left. So you're basically transferring the risk to the facility. So that is available out there at certain places. Now that cost is going up, that's becoming less available. So that's a big kicker. It's just like education planning for children for college, the cost of inflation for long-term care, skilled nursing, or for assisted living typically outpaces inflation by about 3 to 4%, just the normal inflation rate. So that's something to consider as well.
Interesting that you mentioned inflation, because we just had a question come in about that. He says, our biggest unknown today is inflation erosion. How do you advise on dealing with inflation losses?
Yep. So for those of you that may not have a strong background of what inflation is, basically it's the cost of goods or everyday living expenses become more expensive as time goes on because the purchasing power of the dollar becomes less. And so we are at record inflation rates that we haven't seen for over, call it 30 years. And inflation historically runs just shy of 2%. It's about 1.8, over 100 years worth of data. When we build financial plans, we're very cautious when we build them. We like to be very conservative. So on certain known expenses such as long-term care or college funding or just healthcare, private insurance, we'll inflate that at, to the tune of 6 to 7%, or CPI core inflation plus 5%. Any sort of just normal, everyday living expense, we inflate at 2.5%. So I like to be a little bit on the north. But the best combat inflation, one is a fixed mortgage. I think that's probably the best bet that you can ever find financially. So it's a one-way bet, right? If interest rates go above and inflation's running really hot, that is beautiful to homeowners because your payment 10 years down the road from now is probably worth 30% less in today's dollars than it will be in the future. Now, if interest rates go below where interest rate is, guess what you get to do? You can refinance and drop it lower. So it is a beautiful instrument for the U.S. consumer. Outside of that, I think owning income producing assets is a no-brainer, or assets that have a chance to appreciate. What a losing bet is, and I'm not saying cash is not an important asset class. Cash absolutely plays a role in investing. It plays a role in your spending policy. But cash is proven to lose purchasing power every single year. That's by design. The Fed controls the money supply. They have to stimulate growth by putting money in the economy, which in return, lessens the purchasing power of the dollar. But owning assets such as companies via private placement, via public stock, owning rental properties, commercial properties, anything that has tangible value that produces some sort of income or earnings is the best hedge against inflation.
Owning your own business.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing. I've been doing this for quite a while now and work with a lot of entrepreneurs and people who are exit planning, and we'll start talking about equity returns, and the returns that you can get from owning your own business can't be matched anywhere else. I can promise you that.
And it's a great second act for people going into retirement to start to do work that they love and turn it into a business. So
Just like Hey Boomer, right?
just like Hey Boomer.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about life insurance.
Yep.
You mentioned that hybrid long-term care, which in a way sounded like a life insurance
It is.
policy.
Yep.
My understanding is that I'm a single person. I have no responsibility as far as kids. I don't need life insurance.
Yep.
How do you advise people around life insurance?
So the insurance industry has made it really complicated for a reason. Warren Buffett's greatest investments have been insurance companies because they make a lot of money. And the way they do that is through complicated products. Typically, the good rule of thumb is the more complicated the product, the more lucrative it is for the insurance company. Insurance at a core is a vehicle that's designed to transfer risk. It's not an investment. And a lot of times it gets sold, life insurance gets sold as an investment. It's just a way to transfer risk. To understand if you need life insurance is a conversation of its own. And so you have typically when I advise clients if they need life insurance, they're younger, they have a family, if something was to happen to them, their family couldn't support a mortgage, couldn't support education, could not provide. That's where life insurance plays the biggest role, is for a family. We always recommend term life insurance. It's the cheapest. You can buy a 30-year policy. Hopefully in 30 years, if a family's done things the right way, house is probably paid off, or they have a big enough nest egg to sort of absorb any sort of blow, or they're in retirement where you don't have these responsibilities or the need for insurance. So it can play a role in estate planning to provide liquidity for a state that's north of $20 million where you have some sort of estate tax that's in play. There's also, it can make sense maybe if you wanted to leave a really pointed, inheritance left to somebody. I want to leave, call it $50,000 on the dot. Well, here's this life insurance policy. It's guaranteed to leave $50,000 at your death. Well, then that's pretty easy planning right there. Outside of those two areas, in terms of, final expenses for a funeral or some sort of inheritance or to pay for estate tax, there's no need for it. There just really isn't. It's an expense that you don't need to be spending money on.
Yeah, that was my understanding. Just one more thing about insurance kinds of things. It's about annuities. So my mother and father bought an annuity years and years ago, and that's what she lives on now. Mm-hmm. But my understanding is that it's not a good investment now. Is that correct?
Yeah. So back to the thing, investment, right? So an annuity is an insurance contract at its core. And interest rates are in a much different environment now. And that's one reason annuities are so popular. People are worried about losing, running out of money, having some sort of guaranteed life, income throughout your life. But 30 years ago, if they would have bought a 30-year treasury bond at 15%, that's the safest investment you could have ever purchased. And you'd be getting, interest payments of 15% right now. It's pretty attractive. It's been a great trade back in the day, right? But unfortunately, the 30-year bond's at, just shy of 3% right now. So one thing to understand about annuities are they're a contract with the company. You'll hear terms like guaranteed, one guaranteed lifetime income. One thing to think about when you hear guaranteed, you're basically putting your full faith in the solvency of the insurance company. So you'll see a little asterisk at the bottom of any sort of ad or contract or solicitation. And it says guarantees are backed purely by the company's ability to stay solvent. So say, I think AIG declared bankruptcy in 2008, got bailed out. But if you have your entire life savings in some sort of annuity contract. And, it's pretty rare for an insurance company to go bankrupt, but it can happen. We've seen it happen. That's the golden rule of investing, is don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Right.
That's what annuity is. Also, all those great benefits you hear them speak about, they cost money. So if you want an annuity with a death benefit, like an insurance product, that's going to cost you a percentage point every single year you hold the contract, or half a percentage point. If you want lifetime guaranteed income after your annuity runs out, that's going to cost you percentage points. If you want some sort of investment feature that's tied to a fund, a mutual fund, or some sort of proprietary product, those are going to have their own expenses. I reviewed annuity contracts that have expenses north of 5% a year in them. And one thing to understand about annuities, and it's going to sound like I'm an annuity hater. I'm not. I just believe in managing money in the best way possible, and I don't believe that annuities, the way they are sold as investments, don't ever live up to the hype. An annuity contract, it's real important to understand, so say you're the insurance company, I'm the annuitant, I give you a lump sum, and there's an accumulation period. So it gets put into your account, you invest the money, you give me a little portion of the earnings, my annuity grows, and then as soon as I want to annuitize my contract, start pulling money out, we enter in a fixed relationship. You pay me in annual installments or monthly installments, and that money is yours. I no longer have any control of that. The only thing I have rights to is that fixed income stream. So any sort of death benefit, I'd have to pay extra for. But at that point in time, that money is no longer a part of, my control.
Hmm.
So flexibility is a big thing in annuities.
Yeah. Quintin, we could certainly talk a lot longer about all of this.
Yeah.
So many things to learn, and which is why I am interviewing people, so that I can find people that I feel like I really trust and can understand and look out for me. So, hey, Boomer, I always ask my guests if they have 2 or 3 takeaways for people based on all that we've discussed, or maybe what we forgot to discuss.
Yeah.
So do you have 2 or 3 takeaways you'd like to leave with our audience today?
Sure. I would say interviewing multiple. I think, Wendy, you're doing a great job of trying to find, a partner, a financial partner through your retirement journey. I think interviewing multiple people, even if you have a referral to someone, someone you really trust, says, "Hey, I work with, Quintin." They may, that might be a great relationship for them, but that might not necessarily be the perfect relationship for you. So I think interviewing multiple financial planners that work at multiple firms, because we all do things a little bit different. There might be a CFP out there who loves annuities, and that's his whole practice. And if you're the client for that, then great. Then obviously we weren't going to be a fit, and that's okay. You don't have to be everything to everybody. So I think interviewing multiple people. And then I think the biggest thing is, when you go into those interviews, is having an understanding of what are your goals, what are you trying to accomplish, and having those defined, or defining those with the financial planner, is the most important. Investments are the last piece when it comes to financial planning. I think having the goals defined and building a plan around that is what ultimately sets people up for success.
Great. Thank you, Quintin.
Yeah.
And if you have other questions for Quintin, his email address is qpile, P-I-L-E, at greenwoodcapital.com.
Right.
So I'm sure he'd be happy to talk to you. So last week, we talked about some of the difficult conversations that we need to have about our money and our parents' money. And today we did a deeper dive into the financial plan and all of the different aspects that we need to think about with that. And I hope that these have been helpful to you all, because I know this is an area for me that I'm still getting more comfortable with. But if you have other questions, other things that you want to know where to find the resources, you can always email me at wendy@heyboomer.biz. I can point you in those directions. Or maybe we can start some kind of discussion groups, where we can support each other as we're going through some of these changes. And then to continue on our theme of financial security next week, I'm speaking with Ryan Frederick, and he is the author of Right Place, Right Time and CEO of Smart Living 360. Ryan helps individuals and institutions thrive in the age of longevity by focusing on the intersection of place and healthy aging. He offers a free Right Place, Right Time self-assessment tool on his website, which I will put in all of the promotions that are coming. And I encourage you to take that. So we're going to be talking about, not just the financial side of housing, but the emotional side, the spiritual side, the social side, all of that. So that should be a very interesting discussion. If you like what we're doing here on Hey Boomer, please support the work by buying me a coffee through a monthly contribution or a yearly membership. You can go to buymeacoffee.com at Hey Boomer, excuse me, Hey Boomer 0413. And I thank you all for tuning in today. I know that your time is valuable, and I appreciate that you chose to join us. And I like to remind you all to live with passion, live with relevance, live with courage, and remember that we are never too old to set another goal or dream a new dream. Thanks, Quintin.
Yeah, thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
Thanks. My name is Wendy Green, and this has been Hey Boomer.